It is 6 p.m. on August 9th, 2022. We are prepared to open up the meeting. Mr. Baker?
Ms. Ulrich? Here. Mr. Unger?
Here.
Mr. Wallet?
Here. Mr. Weckbach, who's sitting in for Mr. Mills today, is there any executive session business to be done?
Yes, I request that the board motion to go into executive session in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, Section 121.22G2, to consider the purchase of property for public services or for public purposes, in accordance with G3, to discuss pending or imminent litigation with the township's attorney, and with G1, to discuss the employment and compensation of public employees.
And who will be invited to this?
Andy Brosart and township staff.
All right. And the fiscal officer?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any motions to that effect?
I motion that we go into executive sessions for the reasons detailed by Assistant Administrator Weckbach.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
None.
All right, hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Baker?
Ms. Ulrich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Wallet?
Yes, that passes 3-0. We go into executive session at 6:01 p.m. Please stay tuned. We'll be back. All right, calling the meeting back to order. It is 7 p.m., August 9th, 2022. We'll do a roll call.
Ms. Ulrich?
Here.
Mr. Unger?
Here.
Mr. Wallet?
Here. Is there anything to report, Mr. Weckbach, from executive session?
Nothing to report.
All right. At this point, we will do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we just continue with a moment of silence for all of the citizens of Colerain, state of Ohio, the United States, that everybody can overcome obstacles that face them on a daily basis to be the best person that they can be. Thank you. All right, you've been provided in your board packet with minutes. Are there any motions at this time with regard to those minutes?
And that meeting was July.
26th, I'm
I
sorry.
motion that we approve the July 26th meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I sent you one additional word to reference what I was talking about.
Yes, I
Okay, and you got that
made
in there?
that change, yes.
Thank you. Otherwise, I thought they were great.
All right, we'll call the question for vote.
Ms. Ulrich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Wallet?
Yes, that passes 3-0. The presentation scheduled by Chief Denny introducing swearing in newly hired police officers is going to be tabled until the next.
Correct.
Okay. We don't really need to do an action for that. All right, and it brings us to citizens' address. Germania, Allison.
Guten Abend, vielen Dank.
Guten Abend.
Make sure your mic's on. I don't know how to say that in
You might
German.
have to say it again. Guten
Yeah.
Abend.
There we go. I said Guten Abend, vielen Dank, dass Sie uns haben, which is good evening. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm Mike. This is Allison and Willie G. I don't know if you guys ever see our videos on the Germania page, but Mike and Willie and I do those a lot, so we are those Germania guys. So Germania has a lot going on right now, so Dan was nice enough to invite us up here to talk a little bit about some of the things we have at Germania. I don't know if you guys know, but Germania was founded in 1964. In 1969, 4 families banded together to purchase 21 acres out on Colerain, or on West Kemper Road, 3529 West Kemper Road. Today, our property expands to 35 acres, so it goes from the back of Crest Road all the way up to West Kemper Road. We're active in the community. We are a nonprofit organization. We have our own scout troop, which enables young kids to learn the scouting and things like that. We also support the German American School, which does German language and things like that for the community. One of our members, Greg Vasky, he's a German teacher at Oak Hills High School. And recently, we've sponsored several students that have gone to Germany that wouldn't have been able to do so because they wouldn't have been able to afford it. We operated during COVID.
We were outside, we're outdoors, so we were able to do that, and we had started our beer garden series then. But with COVID, Germania is cashless, so it's all credit card, or you can get a Germania Geld card free of charge, and you can reload that for your purchases on that. So Alice wants to talk a little bit about some of the events we have.
Thank you for having us. So some of the events that we have at Germania, we have a fish fry every year around Lent time. We have the best fish in town, in my opinion. It is pan fried. It's not deep fried like chicken triangles of fish. It's really good. It was voted the best fish fry in Cincinnati. We also have a Volksmarch, which, if you're not familiar with Volksmarch, is a traditional it's a hike. So basically, you're going through the grounds of Germania, over through the wonderful the woods that we have, and on the grounds. It's a 5 or 10K. So a lot of times people think of a 5 or 10K as a run, but no, this is a march. So you can bring your dogs, you can bring your kids. And then you come back and you have traditional German fare, traditional German food, and I'm the chairperson for that kitchen. So we try to keep it fresh, and we also have like traditional, every year we have salads and goulash soup. It's really fun, very laid back event.
What's the date of that event?
The date of the event in fall is the 22nd of October.
Okay.
And then we're gonna, every year, it goes by the AVA, so we're also registered with the American Volksmarch Association, which correlates to German Volksmarches too. So depending on when they make those events is when we do our Volksmarches. So it will be communicated throughout the community too.
Our big event coming up is Oktoberfest.
The next one coming up is Oktoberfest. Well, we also have like the beer garden experiences throughout the summer. So keep that.
You have all kind of bands. You have the different bands that come up to play and
Yes.
have the.
Yeah, so we try to keep it a little bit fresh. It's not necessarily polka bands every time. We have other rock bands that come up. It's also, if you have people that want to have a certain band play, you can purchase them and we can schedule them in to play for one of those beer garden experiences. If there's like birthday parties or anything like that, you just have to contact us and we'll accommodate for that. The next Oktoberfest is coming up. It's going to be very great. It's the 50th, and we're in. Actually, Thomas is going to talk about that. But I just wanted to mention that we also have so have any of you been to like one of the Oktoberfests where they have the Stein holding competition?
Yes.
Yeah. So we actually have a state registered Stein holding competition at Germania. So the championship, yes. So if you want to test your guns, come up and we have it's called Moskubstrommen. And then we call it CKM, Christkringelmarkt. This is one of our biggest events too. It's early November. We changed it from late November for weather purposes, but this is where you can come and get all of your handcrafted German gifts and ornaments and food, and it's a really good opportunity to come up to. And I'm going to give it over to Thomas to talk about our big event, our 50th Oktoberfest.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Oktoberfest is coming, just a few weeks away. I'm very excited about it because I'm also the bar manager for Germania, and I've brought in 9 Oktoberfest beers for this event. You should not want to miss that. Friday night would be your best opportunity to be able to get all 9 of them, as some of them are in limited supply. Unlike Oktoberfest in the past or other groups, they limit themselves to several distributors. I use all of mine, so we'll have a total of 25 different German beers on tap, including Bud Light and Miller Light. I hate to have to do that, but I have to have it. and seltzers. But Oktoberfest, it is our 50th anniversary. So we've done this for 49 times already, and we're getting ready to hit the 50th. 2020 would have been our 50th. So we're pulling out all the stops. Unfortunately, we are not going to be able to have carnival rides as we've had in the past because COVID pretty much took most of those people out of business. However, for the children, we are going to have some blow-up items, not bouncy houses, but basketball hoops, soccer things, stuff that they can play with. It's all free for them just so that the parents can have a good time. We have a whole big area for them, face painting. It's going to be a great family event. We do have a paid parking on site, and the reason why I've gone in that direction is because we have limited parking. 2019 was a record year, and the biggest issue we had was our buses from our free sites sat for 2 hours in traffic because all the people wanted to park on our site and there was no parking. So we've eliminated that issue by 3 different sites for buses that are free, and you have to prepay for your parking in advance. So hopefully that will alleviate the traffic problem. We did speak with the Colerain Police Department, and they are cooperating with us in some other aspects of our event, as well as we have the Sheriff's Department out there every year anyways. So that in and of itself is our Oktoberfest, so I'm going to turn it over to Mike so he can wrap it up.
Great, man. Well, thanks again for having us here. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
So how would people learn more? Do you have a website?
You can go to our website, or you can go to our Facebook page. So if like our Facebook page, there's a lot of information and videos on there, and the website, www.germaniasociety.com.
It's a great organization, and it's right here in Colerain Township, and you do a marvelous job of keeping the grounds up, and it's a real gem to have in the community.
Well,
so
great.
thank
We
you for
appreciate it.
coming.
Yep. Thank you for inviting us, and like we say, come for the beer, stay for the Gemütlichkeit, and we'll see you at Germania. Prost.
It's August 26th and 27th and 28th. Okay,
Dates
thank
are
you.
on there on the website. And we also have the bands and all the entertainments posted on there as well.
Let's hope for some good weather. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. All right, next is Ms. Stephanie Wright. Good evening, ma'am.
Hello. I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions this evening. And it's very nice to see Mr. Weckbach here this evening. One of my questions would be directed to the 4 of you, the 3 trustees and Mr. Weckbach, who were the only 4 people present besides Kathy Moore at the May 30th, 2022 meeting that was held on Memorial Day for an abatement of property. And I wonder if I could get some clarification from the 4 people that were actually there. Was there a resolution passed at that meeting for property abatement?
Yes, that was passed, and is Mr. Baker, I talked to you today, that is posted now, right? Yeah.
It's not. But okay, so that's resolution 5522. I actually visited the township to look at the resolution book myself. I don't like to take anyone's word for it or whatever. I like to see things with my own eyes. And I also noticed there are a few other resolutions that are missing in there as well. I thought the purpose of a resolution was pretty important, that it was kind of a legal standing ground. That's why you all approve those things and present those items so that we have a recourse to fall back on if something happens. So I would encourage the trustees and the staff of Colerain Township to make sure that we are up to date in those resolutions being posted online and available during business hours at the township. The second, still talking about resolutions and abatement. Tonight we're passing another, well, there's 13 more on the agenda this evening. And I understand just because it makes it to the agenda doesn't necessarily mean that it's followed through. That's a step in the process. However, since January of this year, we've had 159 addresses put onto resolutions. And as of today, as of August 4th, we've yet to pay a contractor for cutting the grass, for picking up trash. We have 2 contracts, one with DW Landscape They've yet to invoice the township. So we're talking since January, and we haven't received an invoice. Who's in charge of this? How does this fall through the cracks? And then we also have a contract with Rumpke for abatement, and they go and clean up trash or mattress and stuff like that as well. And once again, we haven't paid them. How is that financially responsible or way to run a business? I have no idea. And I have a question about a position that was appointed last meeting, the Assistant Director of Public Services. It says on the contract or job description that it's a short-term position. And we are still actively seeking a Director of Public Services. And then now we're seeking a, excuse me, the word has escaped me, planning event coordinator. So what happens when we hire the Director of Public Services? We have hired an events coordinator, and this position of short term is no longer needed. What happens to that employee? It just seems kind of odd. I'd also like to know if we still employ 3 labor litter pickup individuals in the community for the township, and are we up to staff on zoning and code enforcement employees? So how many are in those positions? Has anyone resigned or left that position in the past 6 months? I'd like to thank Mr. Wallert for standing up for the residents of Colerain Township and trying to make our commercial property owners responsible for their property. The Lamar Group was here 2 weeks ago to get a variance on something for Stone Creek. Mr. Wallert was the only one that saw the vision the same way that I do, is that if someone's in violation of something, you don't reward them by giving them a variance. So the property is still not up to code. There's vehicles that are junk that are still sitting there. Yes, the donation bin was moved, but now that problem that the 3 of you had control over is now another business's problem because they just moved it on down the road. You had the opportunity to squash it, get it out of here, but you were passive in that, and now the responsibility is going to fall on another business owner. And then I'd like to know how many commercial building vacant license agreements there are. There's been 1. It's been holding pretty steady for about 15 years. Just wondering if they've made any progress with those. And one last thing in closing, Mr. Miller last meeting mentioned the CIC and their public records request for documentation, and said something along the lines that they've had more requests for documents than actual documents for the CIC. I'd like to point out that the CIC has paid more in financial statement approval for Plattenberg than they've made in years. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Kathy Moore, and I don't think we have any more out there after Ms. Moore. Good evening.
Good evening. I have a couple of things to address. First of all, I would like to know why documents received in the building or by any department are not date stamped. When I worked here and when I worked at the county, every piece of mail that came in had to be date stamped. And we have nothing. It used to be done, but now it's not. And I would say that because it's a government document, that it should be date stamped as to when it was received. I think we can afford a couple of date stamps. Public record invoices are not acceptable. If someone does 20 hours of work, it should be documented with what work was done. I have copies of several Plattenberg invoices, an invoice from a sidewalk inspector, and a receipt that references an invoice. All of these were paid with no description of what they did. Is that okay with you? Would you pay something that you had no idea what what service you received. I'm sure it's because I'm sorry. I'm sure it's okay with you because it's been continued for years, and it should not continue. Also, a supposed invoice that says that whatever company received a certain amount of money from the township. That's not an invoice, and I expressed my opinion to Mr. Baker. In my opinion, this is a dereliction of duty. I want you, as a trustee, to know that you have responsibilities to be accountable. Okay, then I sent the board an email after the last meeting, and I'm going to read it. Board, I'm looking for answers. Please respond to this email with your knowledge of the situation. Noticing that there was no org chart or status change for Tawana in the 7/26/22 agenda packet, I made a request for those public records on Friday. I am attaching a copy of the response for my public records. First, I received a copy of the agenda. Still no records in response to my request. I asked that the page be pointed out because there was no org chart in the agenda from the website. The last response was that an org chart had not been prepared for the meeting, so my request could not be filled. Regarding Tawana's status change, I was informed that one was not yet prepared. These two responses were received today. Could you please answer as to what you were basing your approval on when you had no org chart in your possession? And this brings me to the fact that I was told after the meeting by Mr. Unger and Mr. Waller that Tawana would remain the event coordinator even with her new job responsibilities. However, that was not on the new job description. Then I see a job opening for events coordinator on the job listings. Do you have any idea what the administrator is up to? Why have job descriptions if the employee is not responsible for filling? Why have job descriptions if the employee is not responsible for fulfilling the responsibilities? This is a problem. We have high hopes for a newly elected board, but we are constantly disappointed. It doesn't have to be this way. Could you please send me a copy of the org chart you approved, but had not seen? Why is the status change not complete? I have a few other things to question and comment, but I'll save them for the next meeting. I'm sure others would be interested in your response. I would appreciate a reply, presumably after Mr. Mills tells you how. You are my elected officials, and I expect more. So then I'm going to go back. Mr. Unger and Mr. Waller personally told me that this employee will continue their previous responsibilities as the event coordinator after the meeting was over. However, that was not listed on the new job description.
Ma'am, if you could wrap it up. You're at the time limit.
You know, do you really care what anybody says up here?
Yes.
Well, then let me finish.
You've just used 15 more seconds to admonish me.
A couple of other people prior to me, they went over their time. So if you're letting people up here to talk just so you can tell them their time is up, you're not really paying any attention. I think you should pay attention.
Thanks for the advice.
You approved an org chart that you didn't even see.
I'm going to go ahead and motion that we add an additional minute to Ms. Moore's time. If there's a second to that.
I will second it, but I'd say give her 2 more minutes. It sounds like she's got a little bit more to do.
All right,
You okay with 2
I'll
minutes?
withdraw the 1 minute and make it 2 minutes.
Thank you, I appreciate
Let's
that.
have a quick vote on it to make sure. Mr. Baker?
Ms. Orich?
No.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that's 2-1. Please reset the clock. Can you do it to 2 minutes?
I don't know how on this, so I'll do
Just
5.
do the math.
Yep.
All right. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Moore.
Thank you very much. What happens when or if we ever hire a public services director? It's been vacant for 11 months. These actions just amaze me that you can vote on something that you have never seen or had no knowledge of. I did receive a response from Mr. Waller, who claimed he was wrong about the employee keeping former event coordinator responsibilities. I feel she has done a great job for many years in this position, plus other responsibilities for public services. But now again, you want to hire another full-time employee to coordinate events. Doesn't seem like enough to require a full-time employee. The only response from Mr. Unger was to not send a message to all trustees together. And again, no response from Ms. Ulrich. Do you think you have a responsibility to your constituents? Do you plan to ignore your constituents whenever they ask a question? That's directly for you, Ms. Ulrich. My suggestion, in the name of transparency, is that Mr. Mills requests approval from the board to post a job opening instead of just changing the org chart. When an org chart is approved, any addition should be brought to the attention of the board and the residents. And again, if you want to be a trustee, please act like a trustee.
All right. Were there any additional public? Okay. Let's go over, and next we'll move to administrative reports, and first we'll handle some of the questions that came up. Mr. Weckback, if you don't mind. I spoke to Mr. Baker today about the resolutions from the May 30th, 2022 meeting. If I guess if they're not uploaded, they are in the process of being uploaded. Is that?
Yes, and that didn't hold up anything. It's just that the resolution hasn't been posted yet.
Okay.
That's all.
And the resolution book, is there been some kind of, is there some kind of table? I've never looked at the resolution book. I look at resolutions when I get them. Is there some kind of table of contents or like an inventory what's in there, so that when we do, if we do have things that have come up missing for whatever reason, we can replace them?
I will defer to Mr. Baker on that one.
Yes, there is.
Okay.
And
All right. We have the no payment towards contractor. I think I spoke to Ms. Wright about this. I spoke to Mr. Baker about this, and I spoke to Mr. Weckback about this. We have not received a bill yet from the landscaping.
That is correct. So in my mind, those dollars that, I mean, we are going to have to pay them when they send us a bill eventually, but we're earning interest on those dollars while we're not paying that bill, so it is to our benefit. We can proactively ask for invoices, but if we're making money on those dollars, I think that in the financial best interest of the township, I don't know why we would continue to ask for those invoices.
And I do think correspondingly, Ms. Moore brings up a good point that perhaps this stuff as it comes in should be stamped. But I don't know what process that would be. Is it stamped when it comes in the mail, or stamped when it goes to the specific office it needs to go to? But that might be something that we might look at.
And on that note, one thing that I do know with our receptionist is she's very sensitive to opening other folks' mail.
Mm-hmm.
So she does not like opening, say, mail that is addressed to Mr. Unger or Mr. Wallett or Ms. Ulrich. And so if the direction of the board is to have her open every single piece of mail to put date stamps on them, we can do that. But just
Well, if something's addressed, for example, to you,
yes,
and she doesn't open it, and it's something that would be eventually a public record that Mr. Baker would have to pull as a public record or something, would it be difficult to stamp that, or has that got a lot of moving parts going on? I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that I've seen that a number of times when it's date stamped. Maybe that's something we should dive into and talk about. I don't.
yeah, I mean, I'll defer to the direction of the board on how you would like for us to proceed.
The labor litter positions, the last time we spoke, there were people filling those. Have they?
We still have 3.
Okay. In zoning and code enforcement, I understand that we have lost one employee, right?
Yes. So John Schuschler was our part-timer. He left. He wanted to go into a completely different field, and I don't know that it's necessarily public knowledge yet, but we do have one more that is leaving for a different position elsewhere.
Okay, and I know that you don't have commercial building license agreements numbers at your fingertips. I will, however, be happy to get those. Those came from Ms. Wright. From Ms. Moore, I do have an answer from one of her questions from last week on the traffic studies. On Pippin, which is Redwood, November 2020 it was done. There's a left turn lane for northbound traffic that was added. January, Kemper, which is M.I. Homes, Abbeytown, January 2020 was done. Springdale, which is Dunlop Station, March 2021 was done, and that's, I think they didn't add anything because there's not enough for a left turn. So that was a question that was lingering from last week. We talked about the documents not being stamped. The question, and it's come up a number of times with invoices, and invoices, ABC Company does work for Colerain Township and bills us $1,800. And it says, I don't know, miscellaneous architecture work. What is the policy? I understand the sense of the question is to make it more specific. Is there a way to do that, or does this sometimes involve multiple things, or how?
Usually, if it's related to a letter of engagement, and we believe that it is related to all the work that was done in correspondence with that, and the staff member should know from their back and forth with whomever they're working with on that contract specifically, then we feel pretty comfortable about what the invoice says. Now, one option is we can always ask them to provide more information. They can always say no. Mm-hmm. We can refuse to pay, but then we get into this situation of, well, why aren't there invoices that we haven't paid and what have you? So, we can always ask, and that could just result in additional charges for preparation of additional invoices too. So it's just kind of balancing what we think makes the most sense in the moment. And certainly if there's ever an invoice that you all want us to go back to a vendor on because you're unhappy with the explanation, we will gladly go back and ask. But again, vendor may say no.
Okay. And the email to the board with the org chart, Ms. Moore emailed, and I said back, I completely misunderstood when we had those discussions. I understood it to be revenue neutral or expense neutral, and that's actually because we don't have an actual public works director, and that's what was making it that way. And from that, I assumed that, or misunderstood that we weren't going to be hiring an events coordinator. I was wrong, and I had told her that after the meeting, and I admitted that in the email. I think part of the miscommunication or confusion on my part is that it didn't result into extra spending. But the org chart was not actually prepared because we had a discussion, I believe, that night on what the functions of that position would be. So in order to function out within the org chart, we needed to complete that, which has since been posted. Am I correct?
The org chart has not been updated. So the
job description.
We approved an org chart back when we did our strategic plan for this year. So that does exist. Yeah. And as the year goes on, and I know a couple meetings ago when we added a position, I asked Jeff, where does that take us? And he would report on it later. But when we approved that org chart, so there is an org chart that exists, and what happened last week was we added a position to it. So to say there's no org chart, there actually is, and it's in the record, and it was approved, and it's in our strategic plan, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Weckbach.
So to clarify my understanding, in the org chart amendment that we're referencing, there was an updated roster. That roster listed every single position that is authorized as a position in the township. And as you go down the list and get into public services, what was authorized by the board does not include a public services director position. It includes an assistant director position. It still includes an event coordinator position. However, the conversation that the board had at the dais was they would still like to see if we could find somebody for the director role. So for that reason, the job posting has been left open. If we were to move forward with hiring a director, we would have to come back with an additional change to this to add that position in. So right now, when we get down to public services, you will see on our roster that's been updated, there is no director of public services. The first job in that organization is the assistant director followed by the event coordinator, and so on and so forth.
And an additional job description, which would probably look much like the previous one for director.
Yes, any changes we wanted to make at that time. So this is what we use to fill positions. So if there's a position that there is not a person that aligns to this roster, the org chart is just the pictorial representation of this.
All right, and I think that takes care of questions. Then administrative reports to continue.
All right, first up tonight, filling in for Chief Walls, we have Battalion Chief Steve Kahn.
Good evening,
Hello,
Chief.
Steve.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for letting me step in for Chief Walls. I believe he had something come up this evening, so I'm on duty, so I got the call. Stepped up to the big leagues.
You were told to be here, and that's why you're here.
That's exactly, there you go. So I do have the dashboard report for the month of July 2022. Total incidents, our EMS incidents were 783. Fire incidents were 188. We did have 42 runs to the Springfield Township contract area up in Pleasant Run Farms area. We only had one real significant fire incident during the month. We had a small building fire on Eagle Creek where the resident noticed some mulch burning that actually ended up tunneling underneath the wall and up into the house. At that point, our crews were able to hold the damage to about $1,200 of loss. The resident did go to the hospital with smoke inhalation, but was released later on. So that was really about the only major fire incident at that time. So our reported fire loss was about $1,200 and property loss on that fire. We had about $160,000, $161,420 in property conservation. As far as our response time goes, our average response time for arrival of our first units was about 4 minutes and 48 seconds, and that's township-wide for fire and EMS runs total. First unit on scene, less than 6 minutes average, was 75.03%. So we're getting about 75% throughout the entire township, even our most distant areas at 75%.
And I'd like to point out that this may be the lowest average response time that I've seen out of the fire side of the house at 4 minutes and 20 seconds, which I think is pretty incredible just for fire response.
Especially getting on Colerain Avenue in Fort
Right, and that's not just the turnout times, that's the time to the scene, from the incident to the scene. So, yeah, that's
Very impressive.
that's moving. So that's the end of my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Nice to see you, Steve.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Next up, we have Assistant Chief Ed Cordy from the Police Department.
Good evening again, Chief.
Good evening, everybody. I appreciate you letting me step up here as Chief Denny's in the back mentoring me. Thank you, Chief. Let's see how we do tonight. Right off the bat, to take these off. That's our yearly representation. That's where we are for the entire year. We're at 26,570 calls. I did the math earlier today. We're on pace of hitting 45,500 calls, which is an increase for us of about roughly 5%, 6%. So for the month of July, we had 4,154 calls, which is a 6% increase over July of 2021. We're averaging 134 calls for service per day. Again, we're at a pace of breaking records for that we've had set for the last few years. Our response to emergency calls is at 2.9 minutes, which is 2 minutes and 54 seconds. We conducted 179 traffic stops. Our traffic stops are starting to go back up as we would expect and hope with our impact unit out there. As you can see, there's quite a bit of a dip with COVID and everything that's associated with that. So traffic stops are heading back up. We made 7 OBI arrests. There were 2 uses of force during this report period. One resulting in no injury to any involved party, and the second resulting in an injury to an officer, minor injury to the officer. We had 2 traffic pursuits and 111 physical arrests. We had no internal investigations. Our code enforcement numbers for the month. We had 307 inspections, 125 complaints. We closed 237 violations, abated 8 properties, 21 total property maintenance violations, and 7 total zoning violations. Just some quick stats for our impact unit and for their second full month or the first full month that they've been out. With 39 traffic stops resulting in 9 arrests, 46 warrants. They attempted to serve 5 warrants. These are the high-risk ones that we're purposely going to these addresses looking for these individuals that we do not want out on the streets. Drug confiscations during this time, 979 grams of marijuana, 3.4 grams of meth. They towed their unit alone 10 vehicles. They assisted patrol. This is the biggest number that I've found most impressive during this month of July, is they assisted with patrol on 101 details. So as details continue to increase, having the secondary unit out there, it allowed us to continue to put additional officers and be able to bring 2 to 3 more officers out there to make sure officers are safe. During this time, they had 14 targeted patrol hours, which targeted patrol hours in this regard is they were sent to homeless camps throughout the township, sent to specifically look for these in different areas, search for known homeless subjects with warrants, traffic enforcement, things like that. They assisted also our criminal investigative unit with 14 hours of case investigation. So we're out there doing what we need to do, and this impact unit continues to make a difference, or an impact, if you will.
Ed, I happened to stop up here the night that several of our officers were out on, running down some of these outstanding warrants with the folks that are, as you call, homeless or vagrants or whatever, and there was a lot of excitement amongst your troops about some of the things they found, and it sounds like it was really effective. I just happened to stop up that night to check on something else.
Yeah, good work and solid arrests and things like that when you're confiscating different items. It's infectious.
Sure.
That's the type of work.
And it
we
puts the
all
word
wanna
out
do.
that move along,
Yeah, we won't stand for it.
right.
Also, I love getting the positive feedback from a lot of the neighbors love seeing your police officers on their bicycles through their neighborhoods. It's cute how people go, oh, we love seeing them. So it's nice to hear that.
That's unfortunately something we're not able to sustain throughout the entire
I
year
know.
because the 2 officers that man our bike unit are the 2 folks that are in charge of our school unit, but they start back this week. So we're going to lose our bike team for at least for the winter time, but they love it. It's crazy the amount of feedback that we get from that. Everyone loves it.
Mm-hmm.
We got some pretty nice bikes too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll be hearing from you later, right? All right.
And before I dig into the public services report, to kind of piggyback on that, school is going to be starting. So be on the lookout for school buses and aware of the traffic safety laws around that. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call and we'll gladly explain what you are and are not allowed to do when that red stop sign is out. Usually it means you need to stop. So for public services for the month, we're trending up again in terms of park visitorship. So across all of our parks, we're at 165,000 vehicles that have entered our park this year. So that's a good number. It's well within the range of what we're hoping for. A little less than our stretch target, which was the high point back in 2020. As we know, that was during COVID when a lot of folks were at home, and so the parks were really their only avenue to get out of the house. As we continue to look and see where we are and what we're doing in our public services side for roads, potholes continue to be the high point of what we're working on every month, followed by signs and then minor items throughout the year. Stormwater and storm basin repairs are something that we work on typically in the fall as we get into the winter months. And then when we track the amount of trash collected by our litter laborers, we had 185 bags collected solely of trash by them last month. So that's between the 3 part-time employees. And the next report we have for you is out of the development department.
Mr. Miller, welcome.
Good evening, Board. Volume in the Development Department did come down this month from last month's record levels. There were 54 zoning certificates that were processed. We had 1 case before the Zoning Commission, 1 at BZA. They'll have a public hearing scheduled at the next meeting for one of those. There were 42 various residential certificates 11 new single-family home builds that were approved. We had 10 solar projects that I'm sure Mr. Weckbach is happy to hear, which is equal to over 86 kilowatts of electric generation. We had 12 commercial certificates, one new business, which is Home Buys, up 10,200 Colerain Avenue in the old Dick Sporting Goods space. We were up there for the ribbon cutting on that. And we're continuing to see interest from home builders that want to build anywhere we can find them space in Colerain. So that's exciting. Speaking of which, Dunlap Grove had their model home opening this last Friday, and they are selling lots right now. Even on that Friday, they sold 3. So that's good news. So they said that they're going to do an official groundbreaking September 15th. We'll send that information to you. I'm sure they would love to have your presence there. On the other hand, our demolition program is continuing to move forward. We've been tracking this since the first of the year, and so just today we received a draft of the contract from the Port Authority and a proposed amount that they would match to us in a grant program. And so we'll be in the process of reviewing that and getting it back to them and moving forward. So at this point, we still have 5 homes on the list. I'll mention that we've had one particular home at 3484 Niagara where the bank had moved on foreclosure, and they had removed all of the orders except for the driveway that was being repoured. And that contract was signed today for the new driveway, and that'll be done. I talked to the contractor myself, and it should be done within the next couple weeks. And so that would then put that house back essentially ready to go on market when the bank gets final ownership of that and can do that. But they'll get it registered as a vacant building as well. So that's, I guess, good news on that front. Any other questions I can answer for you?
Nice job. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Board. And to wrap up administrative reports, I just want to highlight real quick, we do keep tabs on our customer service at all of our front desks. We don't visit this necessarily every month, but I did want to call attention to it. So this is if you're looking at our administration, planning, and zoning front desk, just seeing what kind of feedback we get from anybody who comes in. So overwhelmingly, they get great responses and good responses for the most part. A couple of times we do have unhappy customers, and we try to follow up on that. The police department, despite the fact that most of the time when folks are coming in to interact with them, it's because they've had a car or a vehicle that's been impounded, or they've had some sort of interaction with our police that maybe isn't the most positive, they still do also get some pretty positive reviews. About 70% of the respondents think they get great service there. And then, of course, the senior center blows them all out of the water. The job Nora Dashley does up there with that is just incredible, and there's an infectious level of positivity there. And that's about 96% of the individuals that come through that door feel that they get great service from our partnership with the YMCA. And with that, I will conclude administrative reports.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to trustees' reports.
Go ahead, Kathy.
I hope Colerain Township people see that we have more park benches for the Metro. We do have some nice garbage cans there. We ask those Metro patrons to please try to put their garbage in them. David, I just saw El Trumpo just put their sign up this weekend, so we got another restaurant coming. And that's about all I have to. Go ahead, Dan.
I'll go. You know what, with respect to the report you just showed, a lot of times when the police show up, people aren't necessarily having their best day by the time they call a police officer, and that would be the same when a EMS or fire shows up. A lot of times they're probably having one of their worst days they've ever had. One of our police officers who's been here quite a while and made his way up to chief would be Mark Denny. And we haven't had a chance to talk because, as I always say, we don't talk outside of meetings. But Mark, you're the first person I got to know here 16 years ago in another place in life. And I think you've done a great job. And as most of the community knows, and if you don't, Mark told us back in January that he was going to retire at the end of August. There's an essay that was written a long time ago, back in the 1960s, by one of the master orators, or orators as he called himself, a guy named Paul Harvey. And it was written at a time when the business of police was mostly a male-dominated business, and as time has gone on, there's a lot of men and women who have made a career of it, and while this is a little bit dated, I would say it applies to all of our police officers. But I'm going to read the actual version of this short essay, and it's got to do with Mark and his leaving here. And there's no way I could ever get close to doing the job with it that Paul Harvey did. Policeman. A policeman is a composite of what all men are, I guess, a mingling of saint and sinner, dust and deity. Cold statistics wave the fan over stinkers, underscore instances of dishonesty and brutality, because they are news. What that really means is that they are exceptional, they are unusual, they are not commonplace. Buried under the froth is the fact, and the fact is that less than 0.5% of policemen misfit that uniform, and that is a better average than you'd find among clergymen. What is a policeman? He of all men is at once the most needed, the most wanted, a strangely nameless creature who is sir to his face and pig or worse behind his back. He must be such a diplomat that he can settle differences between individuals so that each will think the other won. But if a policeman is neat, he is conceited. If he's careless, he's a bum. If he's pleasant, he's a flirt. If he's not, he's a grouch. He must make instant decisions which would require months for a lawyer, but if he hurries, he's careless. If he's deliberate, he's lazy. He must be first to an accident, infallible with a diagnosis. He must be able to start breathing, stop bleeding, tie splints, and above all, be sure that the victim goes home without a limp or expect to be sued. The police officer must know every gun, draw on the run and hit where it doesn't hurt. He must be able to whip two men twice his size and half his age without damaging his uniform and without being brutal. If you hit him, he's a coward. If he hits you, he's a bully. A policeman must know everything and not tell. He must know where all the sin is and not partake. The policeman, from a single human hair, must be able to describe the crime, the weapon, the criminal, and tell you where the criminal is hiding, but if he catches the criminal, he's lucky. If he doesn't, he's a dunce. If he gets promoted, he has political pull. If he doesn't, he's a dullard. The policeman must chase bum leads to a dead end, stake out 10 nights to tag one witness who saw it happen but refuses to remember. He runs files and writes reports until his eyes ache to build as a case against some felon who will get dealed out by a shameless Seamus or an honorable who isn't honorable. The policeman must be a minister, a social worker, a diplomat, a tough guy, and a gentleman. And of course, he'll have to be a genius because he will have to feed a family on a policeman's salary. Congratulations on your upcoming retirement, Mark, and thank you for your many years of service here.
Is that it? That's all. Okay. And I understand we still have one more meeting with you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, a hard act to follow. Thank you, Mr. Unger. In the past few weeks, it's been a little bit of kind of a busy schedule. First off, the second bench looks great. The mall bus stop, people are using the can, it appears, because although today it was a little messy, the last few times I passed by it, it's been a lot better. What used to bother me more than anything else is the sign stuck in the can. I don't know, there was a sign, a no parking or bus stop sign that people would somehow pull out of the ground. With a little help from Ms. Wright, who started me on some of the information, after the meeting, last meeting, I spoke to Lamar Group and explained to him what my reticence was to vote yes on the change in zoning. And in fact, the bin did disappear. And I don't know who took it, but whomever it was, painted over our stickers and put it in another business, which absolutely aggravated me beyond belief. And I started, Ms. Wright had a little bit of a lot of the information already researched, and I was able to find, and I sent to Chief and to Mr. Wackback, Mr. Mills, Mr. Miller, a little bit more about Green City, including the fact that they were incorporated in the state of Illinois. We've got an address and a number on their certified agent. We have, actually the internet is kind of scary that way. We have the two principal owners. I have their cell phone numbers that I gave to Mr. Miller and the chief and the two Jeffs, as well as the two addresses that they tend to vacillate from. And if you really couldn't make me any more angry about the fact that they took it off the property, painted over our violation stickers, I found out they received some $400,000 in PPP money during the pandemic. So, in point of fact, and if you look at some of the Google reviews, what these folks do is they just drop it wherever they want. They take this and they bound the clothes up into big, 500-pound bushels and sell it to Guatemala for $1 a piece. That information that I provided you guys, the other day I was in Springfield Township and saw Green City. Hey, if anybody asks from any of the other communities, please feel free to share it, because I just am not a big fan of the way they do business. I was also able to meet with our state rep and talk to her again today about some work on economic development, and I had a chance to sit down and talk with pretty lengthy conversation with some other trustees on just how they handle things in their community, just to get a kind of view of things. In the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of citizen constituent outreach, and I've worked with, usually I'll have one or two every few weeks, but there's been 12 over the last couple of weeks, so hopefully we're able to solve some of those issues. It's not always swift to solve issues, because when you talk about one person's rights being violated, certainly you have to make sure that you don't violate the other person's rights, and you have to kind of be Switzerland oftentimes to find out what the medium ground is on that, so the middle ground. So that is my report, and just to the folks out there starting school, welcome back. All right, new business.
Thank you, Board. The first item tonight is out of the Fire Department, and that is a motion to issue requests for qualifications for construction management for Fire Station 26 and 102. So this is going to be the first in a two-step process to identify who is actually going to do the construction on these two new stations. So what we are going to do is put this RFQ out. A number of firms are going to respond. That will narrow the list down to 3 firms, and then they will respond to a formal RFP process, all with the goal of working toward a guaranteed maximum price. Once we enter into the guaranteed maximum price, that is the budget. Any dollar amount, change order, has to be done within that guaranteed maximum price that we enter into the contract with. So this is first of 2 steps, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have, but my recommendation would be to adopt the motion.
And I will motion to issue a request for qualifications for construction management for Fire Station 26 and Fire Station 102.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion?
Sure. Jeff, when I first saw this last week, I read through it, and there was a line in there that I had a question about, and I didn't know how those words got in there, but it's on the 3rd page of it at the bottom. And those words are, and they're just a standalone paragraph, as a high-performance building, the facility will be seen as a demonstration project for community resiliency and environmental stewardship. And I looked at that and I thought, well, those words are in there for a reason. And yes, I want efficient buildings, but it seems like those words would compel us to eventually put in all sorts of Green New Deal type projects into the building. And I want to stay really focused on this and build 2 fire stations, with the #1 priority being that we can get fire trucks in and out and ambulances in and out and provide the best service to the community. And I look around, and I know we have 2 electric charging stations out in the parking lot here. Do words like this mean that, you know, we need to put those in over there? And we talk about what we pay our fire and EMS, and none of them can afford the electric cars right now. Does this mean we do a lot of other things? I personally look at that line, and with my experience in construction, and I think, oh, that's gonna drive up the cost 5 to 10%, which on a $9 to $10 million project is, you know, 10% is $500,000. I would rather take that line out and, you know, open up a little bit more room for some other things that would truly benefit the function of the station so that we weren't necessarily a demonstration project for environmental stewardship. And, you know, with that extra money, maybe we take the money we would have spent on that and maybe buy a new ambulance or something, because words like that can really drive up the cost of a project. So I would ask that we would consider taking that one line out. And if contractors want to come forward and say, hey, we can do all this plus that's one thing, but having that requirement in there makes me concerned of what the actual priority is, which this will be the biggest project any of the 3 of us are involved in while we're here. I want to stay really focused, laser focused on building effective, efficient buildings for the purpose of providing fire and EMS services.
Yep.
So that's why I'd like that out. So
And my statement in response to that would be to focus more on the first clause of that statement, which is as a high-performance building. The intent and focus as we get into this is to really hone in on, you know, insulation, building envelopes, and construction materials on the actual building itself to keep that building as tight as possible so that we're not necessarily wasting as much energy cost and gas bills trying to heat and cool the building and what have you. And so that is my understanding of what that means. There would not be any obligation to put in, say, EV charging stations or other measures such as solar or anything to that effect. It will mean, though, that we may evaluate things like gray water. So to the extent that we're able to capture rainwater and use that to flush the toilets, and if that's a more cost-effective system than having just straight water from Waterworks and MSD, that's something that will be evaluated as we go through the process. But as always, the number one thing is to make sure that we get a sound building that is going to provide for the next 50-plus years for this fire department.
Understood. And with your example with water, the 2/3 of that cost is the MSD part, and they really want that metered, so you're still going to pay the sewer charge no matter what the source of water is, treated or untreated water running through the pipes. I'm very happy with the wonderful municipal water we have here, known as Cincinnati Water Works. I want to kind of just from the beginning just kind of stay away from the Green New Deal stuff and make sure we are laser focused on the building. We are building basically 2 barns with big giant doors that open and close, so you're going to lose heat and air conditioning. And that said, I want a very tight building too, but we're not in Miami, Florida, where you're running the air conditioning 12 months a year, and we're not in Green Bay where you're running the heat 8 months a year. We're in a climate where you got 3 months cold weather, 3 months of hot, sticky weather, and 6 months in the middle where the weather's pretty nice. And those words are in there for a reason. And yes, I do read stuff, and I see that in there. So there's another item in there that says the proposed building should have a site energy usage intensity of 35 with a stretch goal of 25 or less. From my research, I found out what that means is we need to be in the top 35% of buildings. Does that mean new buildings, or does that mean buildings in Colerain Township? Because just by virtue of building them, we're going to be in the top 35% because most of the housing stock and other retail buildings here are a little bit older.
Yeah, and if you reach about a 35 EUI, it's about a 30% saving on your energy. If you reach 25%, it's a 50% compared to other buildings.
Right,
So
but if that costs us an extra $500,000 to hit that little incremental goal, so is that, it says, it does, you're right, it does say should have, it doesn't say must have, but that other line, I just assumed that was out of there.
Sure. Yeah, and this is all going to be a balancing act as we're going through design and working with our construction manager at risk, because there are going to be some decisions that are do you have brick facade? Do you have another type of facade? And that's going to be part of the budget as well as other factors. So there's going to be a lot of in and out, a lot of negotiating as we get down into the details with whomever is selected and as we work toward that guaranteed maximum price.
And I think we're going to have room for other things if we take that out. So, Mr. Chair, what would I do? Motion to
Motion to amend the request for proposal to remove on page 7, I don't know how many paragraphs that's down, the words it says is a high-performance building. The facility will be seen as a demonstration project for community resiliency and environmental stewardship. Motion to remove that clause.
So I will motion to do it as you have described,
All right, I'll second that.
and I've made my discussion point on it. It's nothing personal. I just want to stay laser focused on what we're doing. We are building 2 big barns that are going to have
Well, and
the living areas,
a lot
the
more to it, right?
resident areas will be sealed, but we're building big giant
Because one of the big
barns.
things in firefighter safety is to make sure that you've got that adequate hot and cold zone to make sure that
Right.
the carcinogens that come back after a fire run.
Sure, and that's
stay
addressed in
the
here.
barn and don't make their way into the living
And
quarters.
there is a line in here addressing that, and I think it's good that it's in here, and I'm glad that's in there.
Sure.
The new facility will require design strategies to mitigate harmful contaminants, materials from entering the general living quarters. That's covered in here, so I'm good with that, but it's been motioned and seconded. Was there any other discussion?
Well, I think the phrase means different things to different people. It's kind of vague and nebulous, so it's probably better that it be removed so that, 10 people can look at that and come up with 10 different explanations.
Sure.
I guess high performance makes sense, and there's probably a standard for that, but demonstration project for community resiliency and environmental stewardship, I mean, that could be, I don't know, that could be as simple as they have recycle bins in there. But it could mean different things to Mr. Unger, to yourself,
Yep.
in my view.
And that's a fair point, and something to keep in mind with resiliency of these buildings, and we think about the tornadoes that came through in Goshen. A goal is to make sure that if a tornado came through, the actual garage bay is probably not going to survive, but all the living quarters are able to, so that if anybody is inside that building, that they would be able to.
And I would think that'd be covered under getting a building permit to build in this, because you have to have an engineer that determines
Well,
side
there'd be
force
different
winds and.
requirements for the interior of the building, and each one of those.
And
must
any
meet
building, buildings that don't have that language to them are covered with that.
Not necessarily. I mean, they're not necessarily storm secure to the extent that we would like to be for a fire station.
I'm just concerned about what that might lead to on new green stuff, so.
Sure.
All right, at this point then, if there are no other comments, we'll vote on we're not voting actually on the request for qualification for construction management. We're voting on the amendment of removing that phrase. Is a high-performance building, the facility will be seen as a demonstration project for community resiliency and environmental stewardship.
Ms. Ulrich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes,
Mr. Wall?
Yes, so that's a 3-0 vote that removes that phrase.
thank you.
Thank you. Now, at this point, are there any other motions?
But we already have it on the floor to vote to approve it. That was just a
Right,
amendment.
okay.
So,
So are there any other discussions?
no, I think it's great. Somebody did a lot of work putting this together, and I've read through it, and it's posted so anybody can read through it. It's got a timeline, and it looks like projected contract commencement is November 9th, and by achieving this tonight, we should be on track to get started on these next year.
All right, so what the vote is, we're voting on now on the amended motion to issue request for qualifications for construction management for fire stations 26 and 102.
Ms. Ulrich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes, that passes 3-0.
Thank you, Board. I believe our next 4 items are out of the Police Department and Assistant Chief at Cordy.
Evening again. All right, I have before you the resolution declaring a nuisance and ordering abatement. As stated before, there's 13 properties up for abatement tonight. The resolution allows for the removal of uncontrolled vegetation and/or refuge at the following properties: 7598 Bolin, 7079 Colerain, 2968 Compton, 9830 Crusader, 8371 Jackie's, 6620 July, 8799 Livingston, 9834 Laura Linda, 9178 Orangewood, 7639 Pippin, 2907 Sheldon, 10114 Spirit Oak, and 2548 Willow Spring.
I motion that we approve the resolution declaring nuisance and ordering abatement of the properties read by Assistant Chief Cordy.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Yes, the one at 8371 Jackie's, the neighbor across the street and the neighbor next door both contacted me over the weekend, and I actually went and met with the neighbor next door. They invited me into their backyard, and there is a half-filled swimming pool. The grass in the backyard is about 18 inches tall. The front of the house is mostly obscured by vegetation. When we do these, we can't really go in and cut down the big vegetation that's obscuring the house, or can we?
I'd have to look into that.
There's a real nice English bush under there, but there's big giant honeysuckle and weeds covering the front of the house. And the nice folks across the street have been there like 45 years, and I sat on his porch and talked to him, and he said there is an owner, and it is the guy who's listed as the owner of record. I did look up on the auditor's site, and I was able to show him where we charged them $442 last year to cut grass. So we're back again as a repeat, which we hear about those, and it's kind of a mess, so I'm glad it's on the resolution, and I told him it was on for tonight, so. No other comments.
Any other discussion? I agree with Mr. Unger. I think this is another example of, and we've heard this from community involvement before, of tiering these things so that, if they paid $430 last year and didn't get the message, maybe it needs to be a louder message. But we certainly appreciate the effort in bringing these properties into compliance. Mr. Baker?
Ms. Orich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0 for the nuisance and abatement that we have just discussed. Chief?
The next one I have for you is a resolution declaring a junk motor vehicle. Recommended adoption of the motion to declare an order abatement for the junk motor vehicle at the following property, 2302 West Galbraith Road. There's actually 4 vehicles on this property that we're looking to have abated. The first one is a silver Pontiac G6, 2007, with Ohio plates, JNJ 9714, John Nora John 9714. Second vehicle is a gray Buick Terraza, 2006, with no plates. Number 3 is a Chrysler Town and Country 2006. Temp plates N357347, Nora 35 7347. It's Ohio plates. And the last one, the fourth vehicle, is a black Chevy Prism 1997, no plates.
All right, are there any motions at this time?
I motion that we approve the resolution declaring vehicles located at 2302 West Galbraith Road, as detailed by Assistant Chief Cordy.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
None.
All right, Mr. Baker?
Ms. Orich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes.
The next one I have here is a resolution declaring a junk motor vehicle. Recommend adoption of a motion to declare an order abatement of a junk motor vehicle at the following property, 9488 Pippin Road. There's 5 vehicles on this one. It's a silver Honda Accord. First one is silver Honda Accord, Ohio plate JEL 2725 John Edward Lincoln 2725. The second one is a light blue GMC pickup truck, Ohio plate Henry Mary Tom 1952, HMT 1952. Third vehicle, black Ford Explorer truck, Ohio plate David Queen Mary 6972, DQM 6972. Fourth vehicle, blue Chevy Camaro, Ohio plate George Young Robert 2303, GYR 2303. And the last vehicle, the fifth vehicle, is a GMC Sierra, Ohio plate Henry Mary Tom 1952, HMT 1952.
I motion that we approve the resolution declaring the vehicles located at 9488 Pippin Road as junk motor vehicles, as detailed by Assistant Chief Cordy.
I second.
Any discussion?
No.
All right, Mr. Baker?
Ms. Orich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0, and those are declared junk motor vehicles. All right.
The last item on the agenda tonight for us is the motion to authorize the Township Administrator to execute a purchase agreement with PL9 for records management and analytical systems for $86,000. That's not a 1-year cost, but over a 3-year period. The rationale is PL9 is a report management system which is supported by the University of Cincinnati Innovation Hub. The goal is to provide a comprehensive, user-friendly records management system that provides more services to the department than just maintaining records. Their records management system will provide modules that allow us to track criminal activities in real time with the ability to analyze and visualize patterns and trends. These patterns and trends will allow our department to provide data-driven police efforts to the community. I can tell you from experience in the new age policing philosophies, data-driven policing is where it's at. We want to have the real-time ability to adapt to what's happening and where we're at. This agreement is a 3-year agreement where the first year is a setup, onboarding fee, and user fees of $38,000. Year 2 is $24,000. Year 3 is $24,000. I will tell you that since this has been uploaded about 10 days ago, there has been some modifications and some discussions that's being brought up in real time to be able to make this war of what is on deck with what we are accustomed to and what we're actually looking for. So what our goal in this is to have a 1-year setup and onboarding fee, and then this be a 1-year contract from then on.
Okay.
For us to be able to do year 1, year 2, year 3 as we see fit on a yearly basis to reset. So the true request here is to have the setup and onboarding fee as $38,000 with the ability to have additional years onto those, and that'll be part of the actual agreement. So how do we get from where we were to how we are to where we are here? So a little bit of a little background on our current system and the system that we had prior to that. Some of you might be aware of a system called Abatement. Was our prior system that we had for quite some time. We ran into a heck of a hard time in October of 2018 where Abatement systems went down. When we went down, we lost records. We had an inability to retain or to be able to go back on historic records, and we.
And that was a bunch of communities. That
Yes,
wasn't
it
just
was not
us.
Just us. It was actually it was throughout the entire area and throughout the whole company throughout the entire nation had some issues as well. So we were in a hard time, and we decided at that time to look and see what we could do. We looked at 3 different companies. We looked at Sundance Systems. We looked at what is now known as Peel 9, and we looked at another one called Central Square. Central Square was nothing to do with how policing is done in Ohio. It was a company out of Iowa or Nebraska. To be honest with you, I don't remember, but it would not fit in this policing in this environment. Peel 9 was just a startup, knowing that Abatement went down, and they knew this is based upon police officers and real-time officers that knew how to do this type of environment, but the Peel 9 just wasn't where we needed them to be in 2018 as a startup, and we were not comfortable after being burnt by Abatement to go with Peel 9 again. So we went with Sundance. I will tell you that Sundance at the time was what we needed. And I can tell you right now, Sundance is not what we need to move forward. Having a little bit of a unique background here is, in a prior lifetime, I had spent quite a bit of time doing computer programming in classes. Spent 4 years of programming, and as a programming person, Sundance is amazing for programmers. You can type in an address and find, case in point, we had 5 robberies this month. When I type in robberies for this month of July, I had 44 returns of data. That's great from a data's perspective, but it's not good from someone that's trying to analyze trends and be able to see what was happening. So again, Sundance it was great, and it got us from point A to point B, but at this point, Peel 9 has been completely developed and is where we are looking to go. During our conversations with the individuals that are developing Peel 9, we've been able to discuss different modules that we've looked for, that we've requested, that we've wanted, and they've been on the fly willing to adapt and develop these things for us. So right off the bat, I asked them for 3 different modules. A vacation check, a very simple one. Someone goes on vacation, and we have an easy way for us to be able to input it and be able to observe, and they're like, oh, we'll make it, and they already have. The next one was, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the fire department, has a front-facing computer program that's internal that they can see the different calls that they're going to. So they're working on something that we can have internally in our department that we can have up on a screen that we can see where everybody's going and what the current calls are. And the third thing is crime mapping. Crime mapping is a huge thing for us. Crime mapping was something we really went after years ago, and unfortunately, it's just something that we haven't been able to keep up with technology. I've asked them a couple months ago if they could work on a crime mapping module, and they already said that I think they almost have it complete. So the big thing about crime mapping for them is they are able to make a module that's gonna allow it to be externally facing and allow people to access it from the outside and almost have real-time data. And that's all driven by public record for them to be able to see at will, which is frankly kind of cool. I haven't seen an RMS system that has that ability to do that. So from here, like I said, the cost, it is a little bit more, but it's also going to include some of our initiatives to have crime mapping, so we will no longer have that initiative that we would have to worry about or that cost. And probably the most important part of this conversation is they are backed up by Amazon. So the Amazon software and all the different redundancies that Amazon has on their cloud-based backup, we will never have the problem that we had with Payment ever again. So where I'm at from this point is I'm asking for a 1-year agreement moving forward of $38,000, and then we'll continue to go there. I know we are working, and if it's with the board's approval, we will gladly bring back the updated service agreement as a consent item at a later agenda as soon as it's handled with legal.
You and I've discussed when the public calls.
Do we want to make a motion for,
sorry.
yeah, to bring it, I'm sorry,
Right.
didn't mean, but
I motion that we would approve it as described by Assistant Chief Cordy.
I'll second it. I'm sorry.
No, we had discussed when people call and go, what's happening at Speedway? What's happening? And everybody wants to know that this program is going to help the public find out.
Yes, and their original request was talking about crime mapping and,
Right.
and how we can do trends. The prior things, it took days for that data to be uploaded. What they're indicating is their goal is to make it almost as real time. They were talking seconds to be how quick it can be uploaded.
I just wanted the public to know that, because where before somebody had to type it all in, and it, like you said, took days, sometimes it didn't get in. This is going to be, they can type in with the generation today with the cell phone, they can find out what's going on right now.
As Mr. Wallard said earlier, technology, and he referred to the internet, but it's the same difference. Technology is kind of scary, what it can do, and if this is the type of performance that they can bring to us, it's impressive.
And Ed, looking at the document, which is posted on our agenda on page 6, it has very detailed breakout of the 2023 expenses, including the initial setup fee of $14,000 payable January 1st. The other user fees are detailed, and then it shows on the next page that in item E that it would be $38,000 for 23, and if we go to 24, it's another $24,000, and in 2025, it's another $24,000. So it's pretty descriptive. I read through it the other day, and it's all right here. So.
And the benefit of moving forward with this conversation tonight and being able to go from here is we actually get a price lock. So we're going to be price locked into this, but if we move forward, and we might have different pricing from year to year, and I can tell you that this is going to be beneficial not only for us, but for PL9 to move forward together as well. This is the new area that's going to work interactively with our RCIC system that's in our computers, or in our cruisers, and inside our PD. It's pretty impressive what it's going to be able to do and how it's going to interact with our current systems, as opposed to Sundance doesn't.
And we're going to be the forerunner on this, where other townships will probably follow.
Yeah, most likely this is going to be the domino that's going to
Right.
continue to fall around here. We are not the first department in this area to do it. There's been some that stayed with them from the onset when they were a startup 3 years ago. But we're definitely going to be their biggest.
So I'm sorry, were you finished? Okay, I have a couple questions. So you talk about data sharing in the contract. So is this just at township jurisdictions? Does it include the Hamilton County Sheriff? Does it include Ohio investigative units?
Well, even the way that currently Sundance works is anybody that was on that system, you're able to see their data as well. So if I wanted to look at an incident that occurred in Green Township, I could look at Green Township currently because we're both on Sundance.
Okay.
So it talks about data sharing, and what that allows us to do is look at one of their big things that they're driving towards is the networking of criminal activity. So taking the criminals and actually how they network and be able to see who they know, where the vehicles they drive, all that data that they're going to have from all these different arrests and even citations.
Because it doesn't matter as much where they live, but where they
make a web of information. They showed it to us at a conference and was kind of floored by the amount of the web that they were able to make.
So you said Green uses this, and I assume that they've been happy with it?
They use Sundance systems.
Oh, they use Sundance. Can Sundance talk to PL9?
probably could, but I'll be honest with you, I don't know that they're gonna be willing to. Just being with the two different systems and how they're gonna go. Our in-between is actually the communication center. So the communications information will be dumped to Sundance or dumped to PL9. So all the different CAD information where the calls come in gets pushed out to that way.
So Green has Sundance, what you said, so if I understand this correctly, their data dump from Green will be all in Sundance language.
Correct.
And your data dump would be all in PL9 language, for lack of a better term.
Correct.
I know there's a computer programming, I'm probably making your skin crawl with that, but it's the best way I know how to ask. Do we know that we've had this problem before? We have, Mr. Shepherd's fantastic with our infrastructure. We're compatible with this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's a web-based program.
Okay, what happens if web goes down? Amazon has had several outages within the last couple of years. They tend to be targets for often malicious actors.
So the data, and we actually had this conversation, the data is actually stored and backed up in 5 different redundant locations. So it's not, they have their own redundancies and built in, but then Amazon has multiple different backups too.
That was the issue with Abatement, is that they lost some pretty important stuff that could have impacted a lot of court cases.
To be frank, payment was stored in a closet on one server.
Right, but that's not what they sold everybody.
And I do know that if I remember the contract correctly, that if there is, I think they guarantee like 99% that they'll be accessible, and if they go below that during a time period, there's a reduction by 25% of the fee. So,
Okay.
And I also wanted to make sure, I think Assistant Chief Cordy did a good job explaining to it, but this would just be for, the $38,000 1 year.
Right.
I think a $14,000 initial setup fee with a $24,000 annual. And then the other 2 years will be optional renewal terms, that, if for some reason we didn't like what we had, the township would have the ability to, there's no obligation aside from the
Yeah.
first year.
And how much would Sundance cost us for another year, just to get a?
So I believe that, I don't have the quote in front of me, but if I recall correctly, it's $16,000 per year.
Okay.
And we were looking at crime mapping anywhere between 5 to upwards of 10,000 for crime mapping.
We did that when I first started here. We had an intern or somebody that worked with police that did the data and.
We tried, yeah.
Okay.
Kyle, we tried and they tried to use ArcGIS, and that was a class that I took at UC, and that was probably the most challenging thing I've ever had to deal with, because it is not a very friendly thing to do. But it's also, what Kyle had a major problem was pulling the data from Sundance to be able to use for crime mapping.
Okay. I'm sorry to keep belaboring this, but want to make sure that I have all the data here. So, what, your general officer out on the street will have access to this?
Absolutely.
How helpful is that to them? And I'll use this term during the fog of war, when you're chasing a suspect or you're worried about, a citizen maybe being assaulted or something like that. All right, now I got to get my line of linear regression and look and see. I mean, is it something that's actionable, do you feel?
Well, just to be as clear as possible, they currently have access to Sundance in their cruisers. They have access internally into the police department. Their access will not change.
Okay.
I will tell you, the speed of their access will change because this program is much faster. So when I do the data collection and the monthly reports that I send out, it takes a lot longer than it probably should to be able to run some of this data and the data that comes back and sift through that. So is there a difference in how quick they're going to be gathering that data? No. They might be able to dive into that web and be able to see this person associates with this person and be able to build that? Absolutely.
And do we have an idea of what their financial condition is? That was the issue with PAMED, is they went broke. With PL9, I think it's very, it shows a lot of wisdom waiting to see if they got things going, and in essence they are. Are we comfortable with their financial situation?
To be honest with you, I don't have a firm answer on that.
So my understanding is that they've shown that their product can be viable, and that's why they've been able to get other folks on board. And in terms of financial long-term sustainability, that's why I think it makes sense for us to go with a 1-year contract.
Okay.
What we're doing is authorizing the township administrator to execute a purchase agreement. So as you or Mr. Mills goes through this, you can certainly look into that before you finally sign it, because all we are doing is authorizing you to proceed cautiously or not, with answering.
Abatement left a lot of people with a real burned feeling. Including North College Hill when I was there, when all the records disappeared, which is.
And do you know how long we had PAMET before all that happened?
So when did we start payment?
Yes.
Was in, if I recall, Chief, 2012?
So we had them for 6 years before any financial issues even popped up with that organization. So sometimes it's also just difficult to know an organization can
Right.
come back viable.
Okay.
To be clear on that, we were able to recover 90% of what we had. Some of it's encrypted, but we still had the data.
Well, I understand it involved a pretty thorough federal investigation. Is that?
People like Mr. Sullivan involved, yes.
And it seems to me that we didn't make our last payment to them after everything blew up, because I recall at the time, for some reason, something in the neighborhood of $40,000 is in my head. And fortunately, we had not, I guess that was an upcoming invoice, and we didn't pay it because of the problems. So
I appreciate the elongated discussion we've had about this. I think it's very important to have data-driven policing, and I think I agree with you 1,000%. I just want to, like I said, I just was burned a little bit by PAMET, and I'm happy to support this effort to bring that data, because I think that data ultimately will make police more productive, which will reduce the cost of law enforcement to our citizens and/or expand the police force. So that it can address these issues. So I appreciate that. I have no further questions.
neither do I.
All right, we'll call the vote.
Ms. Ulrich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Public Services has a host of things on the agenda.
Yep. And the first item tonight is a resolution for disposal by sale of equipment and vehicles which are obsolete, unfit, or unneeded for public use. The item before you is actually a recommendation to sell through GovDeals our 2002 John Deere Gator, and I will recommend adoption of the resolution.
I motion that we approve the resolution to sell the 2002 John Deere Gator as detailed in the agenda.
I second.
Any discussion?
It's a long time to have one of those without having it stolen. I hear people steal those things all the time.
All right, yeah, happy to, by the way, citizens could bid on this on
GovDeals.
Yep.
GovDeals, yeah. One of these days I'm gonna buy a fire truck, I just know it. All right, Mr. Baker?
Ms. Ulrich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0. That hits GovDeals. Item B.
So this is a motion to approve thermoplastic and line striping of various streets with A&A safety for $37,448.48. So as part of the 2022 annual budget, we identified the need that we need to go out and do some thermoplastic, which is a much longer-term solution toward just going out and painting stop bars and crosswalks and things like that on various streets. We went and we got 3 quotes. We wanted to wait to do this until after we got through our cape sealing and our road program to make sure that the money could be put to better use with those programs if needed. So we feel comfortable doing that. There's a list of the streets that we're looking to paint these stop bars, crosswalks, and various other items on, and I would recommend adoption of the motion.
I motion that we approve the thermoplastic and line striping of various streets with A&A safety for $37,448.48.
I second.
All right, any discussion?
Yes, I'm very familiar with these products, and what it is it's color tinted plastic, usually white or yellow, and you melt it onto the road, and it lasts a lot longer than traffic paint, and it's a lot of stop bars, and stop bar being a 12-inch wide bar, that's the width of the lane, so that there's a definite place where you have to stop because some people don't see stop signs for whatever reason. And I think this will last a lot longer, and it will make the thing about paint is it does wear a couple months into it, and then it doesn't look as good as the day it was put down. And these type of products last a very long time, and I think it's a a great investment. I think of the corner of John Rose and Memory. A few years ago, I sat over there one evening at the request of the person who lived on the corner and watched 25 cars come down the street and watched all 25 of them blow through the stop sign, and we went over and painted some stop bars, and that seemed to calm it down a little bit, but I think things like this will really be something to watch to see how it improves people stopping at stop signs, so. No more.
All right, so it's, I guess what Mr. Unger is saying is, and this I'll defer to the expertise of administration, Mr. Unger, is that this is cheaper than painting it.
Oh, no,
Because,
it's more expensive, but it's
well, right, because it lasts longer.
very
Yes.
permanent.
Efficient.
Yeah.
In the long run, it will be cheaper. For example, we did go out and repaint those crosswalks that you just mentioned, and they're on this list because they've already faded, and that's just sort of the nature of the beast.
Okay. All right, we'll call the question.
Ms. Orich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0. We'll approve thermoplastic and line stripping of streets with A&A safety for $37,448.48. All right, item C.
So this item is a motion authorizing the Township Administrator to enter into an agreement with Human Nature for Fort Colerain Phase 3 for a total amount of $39,485. So as you guys are aware of, we were awarded with this most recent state capital budget $400,000 to finish off Fort Colerain. This is the section of Fort Colerain that currently has the toddler park. If you guys have been out there recently, you notice how old and the aging infrastructure that is in place there. So we would be removing that late this fall, and then hopefully we'll have construction documents out this fall to replace that with a thematically on point and consistent playground that will be for toddlers that is congruent to the existing Fort Colerain. Happy to answer any questions, but I would recommend adoption of the motion.
I motion that we authorize the Township Administrator to enter into an agreement with Human Nature for Fort Colerain for $39,485.
I'll second that.
It's very critical that we have this done with stamped, approved, engineered drawings. They assume the liability for anybody being hurt, and that sounds like a very reasonable number for what they're doing.
Yes, and there's going to be earthwork that's going to be involved, just like there was in Phase 1. There's probably going to be some stormwater issues that we have to address as we go through the project, so that'll be all included under their scope as serving as the owner's rep.
And thank you for pursuing the grant that is allowing us to continue construction and finish out that phase of that project
Yes.
without using local dollars. Yep, I just echo those sentiments. I'm glad to see that's become the new park, the phase 1 and 2 has become very popular as we see from the data, and I'd like to see that continue. Mr. Baker?
Ms. Orich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0. Motion authorizing Township Administrator enter agreement with Human Nature for Fort Colerain Phase 3 for $39,485. Item D.
So this is a motion to authorize the Township Administrator to enter into an agreement with Soiree Taste, Create, Celebrate for the rental of the concession stand at Colerain Park. So several months ago, we issued an RFP to see if there were any interested parties that might want to put that space to productive use. This is the concession stand that's right by the baseball fields in the park. We received one response to the RFP from Soiree Taste, Create, Celebrate. They're offering to pay us $700 a month in rent to use that space, where they would be serving concession type food, and they'd be doing some small fried type foods as well. So think State Fair brought to Colerain Park is kind of what they're thinking in their minds. The owner of this business actually owns a catering business that does work down at Willow Event Center quite a bit. We checked references, and the recommendation is to adopt the motion, and I would be happy to answer any questions you all have.
I motion we authorize the Township Administrator to enter into agreement with Soiree Taste, Create, Celebrate for rental of the concession stand at Colerain Park.
I'll second.
And it does say in here the hours would be Monday through Thursday from noon to 6, Friday from 11 to 7, and Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 7. So
Yes.
there'd be somebody there running a concession for, now I think our movies and events run a little later than 6 or 7,
Yep.
but it also says in here that hours may be amended by mutual consent of the concessionaire and the township.
Yep.
So
you
obviously,
you
if
read
there's
my
a
mind.
movie and there's 100 people sitting there watching it, they're probably gonna wanna stay open to.
Yeah, and that was one of the conversations we had with the owner, was that we have that clause in there, so we can adjust if we need to, and certainly that will provide him the opportunity throughout this fall as he starts to ramp up to get a better feel for when the people are there, and then if we need to adjust hours next year so that he can maximize on his business, then we'll certainly entertain that idea at that time.
And I think it'll be a great experiment to see if it's something we can do permanently starting next year.
Correct.
As opposed to having it sit there not providing services and not generating any revenue, so. And they're providing the employees and assuming all the scheduling and
They're
taking all
providing
that
the
out of our
employees,
hands.
They're getting the health certificate, they're doing all of that work.
And cleanup.
And cleanup, yes. Per the contract, they're responsible for their cleanup. We have some clauses in there about fines and penalties and additional dollars they would owe us if they do not take proper care of their space.
And that's included on item 5 in the contract on page 5 of 11.
So the only question I have on this, and it's really minor, but the $50 late fee if they don't make the payment. So that's just, I mean, it seems like every time I've been involved with any kind of payment for residential things, apartments and whatever, it's where you're renting it and not buying it. It's like a daily charge. Was there thought given to that, or is this, is this punitive enough so in other words, you could pay it on a day late or 90 days late?
So we haven't necessarily went down the route of escalating penalties and fees. The way this is drafted, and I would defer to Scott if he feels differently.
And
I
it
would
says
assume
that, and
it's
I'll
one time.
jump in there, and it says that on item 26 for late payments, but you do have that in for item 28, failure to maintain and keep the area clear of trash, a late fee of $50 per incident. So that could be construed as an everyday, hey, there's trash all over the place, oh, you didn't pick it up today, get out there and pick it up tomorrow.
For
Hopefully,
trash, it could
it's an
be-
experiment, and hopefully it's successful, and if it's not,
But
we
to
won't
Matt's
do it
point
again.
about a late fee for their monthly payment, my understanding in Reed is that it would be a late fee, not multiple recurring late fees over time. And certainly if they were not willing to pay us for more than 30 days after they incurred their late fee, I believe that would be grounds for terminating the contract, and we would want to move on at that point.
And where is that in there, the grounds for termination? So the default were the failure to make a required payment when due.
Yep. So I think it is later in the contract that there is a clause in here about failure to perform anything in the contract will result in its cancellation. So the default, so it's under section 48A, default. So
Right, and-
constitute a material default would be the failure to make a required payment when it is due, and under the default, then we can remove ourselves from the contract.
And then 52 says you have 7 days, but
Right.
Again, I mean, my experience has all been with property renters. Can we get them out 7 days?
I mean, we could lock the doors.
Okay.
And I think there's a typo in here because it goes from item 46, 47, 48, and then it says 48 again. It should say 48, 49, 50, and 51, and there's a typo that 59 should say 50.
Yep.
So you can correct that before you sign it on page 9, the
Sure.
top of page 9.
Yep.
Right. Any other discussion? Any other, the public comment time of the meeting's over. Any other discussion?
Just make that, fix that numbering sequence on that.
All right, we'll call the vote.
Ms. Orich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Wallach?
Yes, that passes 3-0. That enters an agreement with Swery Taste, Create, Celebrate for rental in the concession stand of Colerain Park Development.
And I wish them luck, and I hope it works out for them and
Absolutely.
for us, so.
So this year's budget included an amount that would cover the cost for a comprehensive rewrite of the township's zoning resolution. And so not long ago, the board approved an RFP that was issued. It was out there in public for a while. We received one response. It is a very technical and tedious project. It is very large, and so there are not lots of vendors that are out there for that. But the response that we did receive was a copy in your packet, and it's a combined project which will be between KZF Design and Zoneco. Zoneco principal is Sean Suter. I've worked with him in the past, and then with KZF, Eric Anderson is an architect that we've worked very closely with on township projects as well, for design primarily on sidewalks. And so we feel good about the offer that we did receive. The rationale in our 2021 comprehensive plan that's titled Imagine Colerain. It documents the priorities of the trustees for development and zoning throughout the community. And so our goal now is to ensure that our zoning resolution, that is a number of years old, aligns with that comprehensive plan. And it's on a regular basis that we can go through a zoning request and see that there's just a zone designation on a parcel that just doesn't make sense. And so not sure how those things happen, but nonetheless, this comprehensive zoning rewrite will, I think, be very instructive for us to be able to work with the vendor and come up with a resolution that will, again, take that comp plan from 2021 and align the zoning to it. And so this particular response is from KZF and Zoneco for $92,000. It is under budget for what you had set aside that had previously been included, and so we recommend adoption of the motion.
Right, and any motions at this time?
I motion that we authorize the township administrator to enter into agreement with KZF for zoning resolution amendment for $92,000.
I'll second.
All right, discussion?
Yes, I have read through this, and some of the things you mentioned, yes, there's been an absolute ton of changes in property use and trends away from walk-in brick-and-mortar retail into different things, and you mentioned sometimes the zoning for a piece of property doesn't make sense. Well, the market left that behind 20 years ago, and there's just a lot of things have changed in the last, since Colerain was laid out and grew in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and kind of leveled off in population, and not just Colerain, but, you know, other communities have seen people and move out to Butler, Warren, Claremont counties, and just a lot of things change, and it is time to update. So I get it, and I read through it.
And I think you mentioned this, but just to confirm, is this the only bid we received on this?
Yes, it is.
So it's probably the cheapest.
Well, we're
we've
under
worked
budget
with
on it, so that's
KZF.
good.
The other,
But
This is
you-
definitely the cheapest we
You feel
received.
confident with
Yeah,
this? That's what
yes,
David
yeah.
had discussed before. He feels confident.
Sean Suter with Zoneco was previously the chief counsel for land use and planning, city of Cincinnati. Worked very closely with him on the city planning commission. Very knowledgeable in this area of law, and he had left city employee and went to a couple of law firms, and then now he is focused in this area, specializes, works across the Midwest and Northeast, and so again, feel confident. We have a good working relationship with both Zoneco and KZF Design.
And when it does come to the price, part of the reason that the budget was set at 100,000 was based off of what we were seeing in other communities and what they were paying on these types of projects. So $92,000 is about the going rate for something for this
Right.
magnitude, because this is going to be a time-intensive process. It could take up to 2 years as they go through and write every single new piece of law related to the resolution for our zoning zoning resolution.
I think the current zoning resolution is probably in the range of 280 pages, and so just starting there is going to be monumental.
Any other discussion?
Well, and if you look at page 8, it talks about 3 different projects that we've done with KZF with Colerain Township, and I've been satisfied with those, and I'm in on it. I've looked through it, and it's time to do this.
Mr. Baker?
Ms. Orich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0 to authorize Township Administrator to enter into agreement with KZF for zoning resolution amendment for $92,000. Administration.
Yes, Board, the first item on the agenda tonight is actually a discussion on what the direction is you would like for us to take next year. So over the past several years, we've tried to thematically organize all of our work across all departments into key functional areas. So in 2018, that was transparency, 19 was beautification and engagement, 20 was creating connections, 21 was clean, green, and prosperous, and this year is clean, green, prosperous, and safe. And so what I would hope to gain from you all is just some sort of direction. You know, are we moving in that right direction? Should we be thinking about our work plan in different ways? Are there specific initiatives or goal areas or priorities that you would like us to be laser focused on across all of our departments? And this will dovetail well into helping us start to formulate what we think are great ideas to move forward next year. It will then facilitate other conversations that we have around the budget process with the public, and then ultimately lead to our strategic plan and budget book that will be before you all for a first reading in November. So with that, I will open the floor to you all to help us know what you want to do.
Sure. And for those that are looking at the agenda, strategic goal 1 is increased focus on economic development and township prosperity. Critical, must do that. Number 2 is engage the new economy with green initiatives. 3 is improve the look of the township with a focus on litter and dumping. 4 is manage the township finances responsibly while improving financial policy and process. 5, continue to provide high-quality safety services. 6, continuously improve the operations of the township. I look at those and what I see, and as I said earlier this evening, we are about to reconfigure the way we provide fire and EMS service to a massive investment of capital, and that should either be our first or second goal on this, because it's not just, well, let's build these new firehouses and that, it's where we still haven't decided exactly where we're going to put these, and especially the replacement of the Galbraith Road one, and I would have that as I'd knock out that second strategic goal and replace it with, for a 2023 goal is manage the provision of fire safety and EMS services, because that's what we need to be thinking about next year. And engage the new economy with green initiatives, that's great. We've done that the last couple years. That goes down to number 7, or we could take a break for a year and focus on these firehouses and how it's going to affect the community and what happens with Dunlap Station and the one on Galbraith if we don't rebuild on that site, and the amount of planning and discussion. Do we sell them? Do we repurpose them? Do we have, can we find a business that would be interested in those buildings? Because as we build these new firehouses, I have no interest in keeping unused property. So, you know, and where they're located at, does it match our current zoning code, which goes back to the last item? How can we, what are we going to do with the 2 existing sites, and how are we going to configure these new ones to provide the best service at the most economical price? So I'd like that to be our second strategic goal.
So I agree with Mr. Unger on the green initiative that kind of would slide down. I think that economic development, township prosperity is still a big goal. Improve the look of the township with focus on litter and dumping. I'd also like to add, and this is something that I guess as a single 50-plus-year-old man, it didn't matter to me until I became a trustee. But I look at communities different now, and when I see maybe the median in the roads, other people maybe fill some type of greenery or shrubbery, and I see what we do in Colerain that's lacking, and I think that the look of the township with focus on littering and dumping, I think should also include the look of the township just for the look of the township. I mean, I think that if we're going to work on building economic development and township prosperity, I think we need to improve the look as far as landscape and things like that. The analogy I'll use is that, and this isn't a completely fair analogy, but if you go to someone's house for dinner and they hand you a paper plate, you're thinking hamburgers and hot dogs. If they hand you their best china, you're thinking, some type of specialty meal or something. I don't want to hand paper plates out in Colerain. I want to hand the best china out. And I think that with some of the plans that we have moving forward for economic development, this is an effort to kind of pivot and make Colerain home again for a lot of people. So, I don't know how that fits into the strategic goals, because I think we also need to manage the assets efficiently. And I would say that efficiency should be part of these goals too, whether it's land, capital, employees, and I've noticed for my 2 3/4 years that the administration can be very creative on efficiency methods. Things as simple as going to our own health insurance, all the way to, figuring out the best way to benefit from solar encapsulation in the building. That let's be as efficient as we can with the assets we have, because I think we're entering a time period where we're going to see costs, or have seen costs, just explode and go up, but just inordinate amounts of percentages, things being more expensive, and that we need to be as judicious as we can with our use of assets, and I include the people in that too. The one thing that I think that we've maybe taken for granted for a while is what we pay a lot of our employees. If you compare them to other townships, but they're an asset too. And I don't mean to dehumanize them by saying they're an asset. They're an asset because everything revolves around, they're probably the most important asset. The green thing, I mean, that's on my list of priorities, is not nearly as high, because we've started that ball rolling, I think. But I think about efficiency, and I think about keeping the clean and prosperous and safe, but I also think about improving the look landscape-wise, what we can do. And it's a friend of mine always says, when you have a big project, and this is, I don't know where they stole it from, it wasn't their original idea, but how do you eat an elephant one piece at a time? And we have a lot of things that I think we need to do in order to increase the positive aspect of landscape in the community, and like the I-275 exchange and things like that. I think if the expectations are that we provide that so that economic development does occur.
I'm going to agree with Mr. Unger with number 1, because I think the citizens do. I think we provide them an excellent EMS and police, and I think we should keep that as our first initiative, so I'm going to agree with him on that. Then green, I think, could be the last one. I do believe, we are abating people's houses that have litter and uncontrolled vegetation, and yet we have uncontrolled vegetation on Colerain Avenue, and there's not a beautification anywhere except the Rumpke 2 spots where they landscape. So I think bringing in beautification is going to bring a sense of pride to the community, not only for just economic development, but it's just nice to drive into people's neighborhoods and see how beautiful their flowers are, or their decorative pots. I think we need to show that pride to our community, and I think businesses would follow. So I do agree with both of them on that. And I do believe, the economic development for more businesses, and I think a lot of people would like to see Northgate Mall being on that economic development chart for us to proceed with something with that.
So you're good with figure out where we're putting the firehouses, what development might come about near these new firehouses, what we would do with the existing ones?
Yeah, well, that's, in the future, we don't know who's going to want to buy those. I
Right.
think they've had a couple offers on different
Sure.
sites,
And,
so.
and like I said, that would weave into the zoning thing we just talked about. For
Right,
those
we're going to have,
businesses
right,
that wanted
resent,
Dunlap
those
was
are
put
so
their-
old, right?
Right. So that would be, strategic goal number 2 would be handle this massive capital improvement project that is coming down upon us.
So I think at this point, with the board's acquiescence, I think that the best thing probably would be Mr. Reckback to come back with kind of a bullet point list of this. I think that strategic goals deserve multiple hearings. In this, I think we've started I think we've given you a good place to start, and that we could come back and in administration could come back to us and say, well, you know, how do we do this? How do we do that? What does this look like? Which are typically the normal questions that I would receive from you and Mr. Mills on, hey, I want to do this, you know, to kind of specify it a little bit more.
Yeah, so my recommendation as a next step from this conversation is to draft what I'll call a resolution adopting legislative priorities that kind of encapsulates what we just talked about. Bring that to the next meeting for a first reading, and then have a second reading and potential adoption at the first meeting in September, so that there will be 2 more opportunities for folks to kind of weigh in on what they think the legislative priorities can be in this forum. And then in addition, after that, we're going to be getting into budget season. We'll be starting to do like we've done in past years, where we have conversations with the public around specific tangible initiatives that might fit into these buckets.
And I would also ask with Circle, is there a way we can push this out through Circle and ask for, and maybe not even include what our priorities are, because I don't want to mess up the data, but to ask what priorities are for folks, or something on the website that we could get.
Yeah, I mean, we could draft a survey, and we could put out a survey to collect feedback, and, you know, depending on what that survey looks like, that may take a little bit of time, so that might just delay this timeline a little bit, but that's certainly something we could do. If I saw Kathy nod her head as something she'd be interested
Well,
in. too.
and that said, this was posted on our agenda, and we didn't get any comments tonight during the public speaking part of the meeting, but maybe if it's on our next agenda, the amended version of it, you know, that might be our first chance to get some feedback that the 3 of us would hear at the same time.
And same with on the agenda for the green, we've done the buckets, we've done, I mean, just to put on there all the things we have done since the green initiative has been made. So people are aware of how we did fulfill that part of our mantra.
And there's some bleed over here, just because we take green and move it down. If our part is to landscape and include more trees,
It's still green.
that's green. In fact,
That's a different green than what they're referring to here. This is Green New Deal green. You're talking about landscaping and beautification.
but it's still green as an environmental, because it creates a cleaner environment. I don't know if you read the study from UC that they just did, that Hyde Park is 10 degrees cooler than most neighborhoods because of some of these decisions that were made. I think we're in a position to make those decisions, and this would be something it wouldn't have occurred to me before I was on the board of, hey, let's provide more foliage, more canopy, and get rid of some of these huge, large things, parking lots.
Asphalt and concrete holds heat, no question. I think that the goal is written for number 2, engage the new economy with green initiatives. That's some kind of ESG score thing, and that's why I kind of want to move that down, so.
Yeah, I think it should be
That's
down.
fine. All right. Any other comments, questions, concerns?
So clarify, survey, bring this back next meeting. What's the preference of the board?
Bring back our discussion for the next meeting, as we, like I said, this is the first time we've had a chance to discuss it among the 3 of us, so.
You don't think a survey would be beneficial?
I'd like to see a survey just to look at the responses.
Okay.
I mean, that can be
If
something.
you want to put that out on Circle or whatever, that's
Yeah.
fine. I don't want to.
I'd still like to
I mean,
see
it's
that
not
before.
scientific, it's not.
Just to
Right,
hear.
it's definitely not scientific. Anybody from wherever could fill it out.
But I'd like to
so-
see different perspectives and positions, yeah.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, you could even just print up the answers or email me the answers, and I'll read through
I
them.
want a lot of bots filling it out. Is that what you're talking about?
You never know sometimes.
Yeah,
So
okay.
we haven't had that happen with any of our surveys, but there's always a chance.
Yeah.
I'm impressed, Mr. Unger, that you know the word bot.
I learned that from Elon when the reason he's not buying
Oh, Twitter.
because 30% of what's on there is robots.
All right.
And, when people buy advertising on that, and they think there's that many people actually on it, but 30% of the people don't exist, I think the advertisers are not getting their value for their dollars, and I think that's the holdup on that deal, so.
All right. Item B, motion to issue requests for proposals for cleaning service 4160, 4200, 4300 Springdale.
Yes. So our current custodian in our Public Services Department is set to retire in mid-September.
Denied.
This is something that we wanted to just put this out there, see what the cost would be, to see if it makes more sense to continue to pay a full-time employee to do that in-house, or if it might be better to outsource it to a vendor that might be able to do it cheaper. So that's the prerogative of this RFP and this motion. Certainly, if the board has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Well, I'll motion that we issue a request for proposals for cleaning services for 4160, 4200, and 4300 Springdale.
I'll second.
There's no harm in seeing what somebody thinks that's worth and evaluating that versus having an employee do it.
Right. So for perspective, one company that I did talk to said that it would probably be about $60,000 a year. Right now, with benefits, that employee costs, their salary is close to $60,000. So without all their benefits added on, it certainly would be cheaper, but then it's a question of whether or not that's something we want to do and a direction we would want to go. So.
And if it's the same either way, I might be inclined just to have the employee do it because you have a lot more control over the employee than a vendor that might have different people coming in every week.
Right.
But it doesn't hurt to get a price.
All right, any other discussion?
None.
Ms. Orich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0. A motion to issue request for proposals for cleaning services, 4160, 4200, 4300 Springdale. Item C.
And that will be presented by our finance director, Jeff McElreavy.
Good evening, Mr. McElreavy.
Good evening. The next item on the agenda is a resolution amending appropriations for 2022. There are 3 changes that are contemplated in this resolution. The first is for the the sidewalk project on Colerain from John Rose to Shady Crest. There is some additional work that ODOT has required as part of the project, so KZF has asked that the contract be amended to account for those additional expenses. And so that would be an increase in appropriations of $23,125. The second item was referenced just a few moments ago. This is the state capital grant for the next phase of Fort Colerain. The increase in appropriations is for $40,000, and that would cover the local match for the third phase of the project. And finally, there's an increase of $30,000 to close out the plan year for medical insurance in the general fund. This is the funds that flow from the general fund into the self-insurance fund. It doesn't have anything to do with the performance of the self-insurance fund itself. And staff recommendation is adoption of the resolution.
I motion we approve the resolution authorizing the adoption of amended appropriations for the year 2022 to get it to the floor.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion?
I'm just looking through here at these different items. Thank you for putting this together. The self-insurance fund, is that where you mentioned an item to get our insurance amount updated?
So yes, the third bullet, the $30,000, is an increase in appropriations in the general fund to cover expenses that are in the general fund that will be paid to the self-insurance fund. It's actually doesn't have.
So it's not an outside expenditure, it's just moving money from one fund to another?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's an asset account right now, the self-insurance fund.
That it's an internal service fund.
Right. So if we have 2.3 million if people make claims on insurance, is that what we're getting at?
That's the appropriation. I would have to go take a look
Okay.
to see what the current fund balance.
That's what it started at, yeah.
And what Matt's referring to is Fund 6001, the self-insurance fund, 22,323,677, that one.
And I understand
That was my question, so.
We keep a pretty high reserve for that.
We do.
Yes. All right. Ms. Orich? Any
No
questions?
problem.
All right, Mr. Baker?
Ms. Orich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0. Authorizing amendment of appropriations. Now we have a resolution creating opioid settlement fund.
Yes, Board, so this is a follow-up from a discussion item at your last meeting. What this resolution does is set the stage for the township to be able to accept the settlement funds from the One Ohio opioid settlement. This is the second resolution that this board has considered in order to set the stage for receiving those funds. The expectation is that over time, what we expect will be 18 years, the township will receive a little over $217,000 from the settlement, the first installment of which has been receipted. Has been received on our bank account. It has not been receipted in our accounting system, I should be precise. And that is for a little over $12,000. Upon adoption of this resolution, then staff will move forward with the accounting work that's necessary to set up the fund and receipt the first payment. Staff recommendation is approval of the resolution.
I motion we approve the resolution creating the opioid settlement fund.
I second.
Any questions, comments?
And as we discussed at our last meeting, Mr. Weckbach, that when it comes to spending of that fund, that would be something that would be brought back to the board for various projects. I know we talked about making sure that that went to the departments that actually incurred the expenses, which was the fire and the police.
That is correct.
And, you know, just trying to line up some money to pay for these buildings we're doing, but that'll be a discussion we have when we get to that discussion.
And in fact, if the board would prefer, in order to ensure that that happens, we can just not include that in our temporary appropriations or permanent appropriations budget, that if we ever wanted to spend something out of there, it would be a special standalone budget adjustment, so.
Because I think the last meeting, we didn't know if there was any guidelines to what this could and could not be spent on, correct?
And I believe there are guidelines, but just
don't
like
have
it
them.
was with the CARES funding, those can change over time and develop as things go on.
So right now, we're just establishing a fund to give us a place to park it, which is fine with me.
All right, any other questions, concerns? Mr. Baker?
Ms. Orich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0 to create an opioid settlement fund. I see no old business. I see no consent items. Mr. Baker, fiscal officer report.
Thank you, Board. One quick thing I have, I had mentioned at the last meeting that the June bank reconciliation was going to be completed soon. It was. It's been posted, and it has an adjusted bank balance as of June 30th of $38,066,728.08. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's no need for executive session?
No, Dan.
I believe that there was a request to have executive session pursuant
discuss an
to
employee
Ohio
issue.
Revised Code 121.22G1 to discuss employment and compensation of public employees.
Okay, well, do I have a motion of that?
Yes, I would like to go into executive session for that reason.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion?
Shouldn't take long. We'll be back and to close out the meeting.
Right.
I don't see any action being taken with it.
All right, Mr. Baker?
Ms. Orich?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0. We will be back after executive session at 9:12 p.m. All right, calling back in session from executive session at 9:51 p.m. Mr. Baker, please call the roll.
Ms. Orich?
Here.
Mr. Unger?
Here.
Mr. Waller?
Here. Anything to report from executive session, Mr. Weckbach?
Nothing to report.
All right, any motions at this time?
I motion we adjourn the meeting at 9:51 p.m.
I second. Discussion? Vote?
Ms.
Yes.
Ulrich? Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, that passes 3-0. We are adjourned at 9:51 p.m. Thank you.
All the stuff we have to sign?